Today I'm going to make a video that's pretty much going to be like a tier list. I'm going to tell you guys what matchups as Samira you want to avoid, which ones you would like to see, and what to do in those matchups if there is anything you can do. This will mostly be for mid lane matchups, but even if you are an AD carry main, you might learn a thing or two. You will probably face these champions in your game regardless, even if it's not directly in the 1v1. If you are new to my channel, you don't know who I am, which no one does. But I'm a Samira OTP. I've played up to like Master Elo with Samira mid lane repeatedly. There's almost no one in the world who has as much experience and as many games on Samira as me, and I guess in this video I'm just gonna share my knowledge on the matchups and the champions. If you do enjoy the video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Especially subscribing would help me out a lot. I'm very close to 1000 subs, kind of, so I would appreciate that a lot. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start with the good matchups because that seems like the most fun. This will be the best possible matchups you can get. If you see these champs in the mid lane, then you probably want to pick Samira because it's a really good counter pick. I will say though, there's no shame if you do lose these matchups. No one wins 100% of the time, but more often than not, your champion should beat these champions. The first one is Swain. I don't know if it's because Swain just sucks right now. That champ just kind of feels like they only have 3 buttons. They have their pull, they have their W, and they have their Q. And the W is usually paired with the pull, but you can W the pull. So that kind of negates 2 abilities already. So this champ is basically Qing you and ulting, which means that pre-level 6, you are very strong into them. You can W the E, they can Q you, but their Q will never outdamage your entire combo. It's just not happening. Really good matchup. I would recommend getting a Bloodthirster as like a 3rd item, because usually you can just kind of out-sustain their damage. Be a really fun and good matchup for Samira. W the pull. You can also just W the Q and try and dodge the E, and that will usually win you the trade. One more thing about Swain that you can do in the 1v1 is when they pull, you can just E onto them and path behind them, so the pull will never really hit you. That way you can save the W for a Q. Next up is Katarina. Really good matchup. Like in any matchup versus Katarina, do not stand on the daggers. When you see a dagger on the ground, do not go near it unless you're baiting her to go in. If she dashes to a dagger, EQ onto her, W onto her, 1v1, usually if you're neutral, you should always win the 1v1, you just straight up out damage. And a big part of that is W, you can W half her ult and then just do your own combo, and usually you'll win out because you W'd half their ult. You can W a Q, which just makes a whole dagger disappear on the ground, lots of damage is just gone then, hard to lose, good matchup. Ari is another really good matchup, probably one of the most fun mages you can face, because she's all skill shot based. Her E and her Q you can both W, which makes the trading usually pretty decent in your favor. Do not W her W ever, it's not worth, trust me, it's just a waste. Focus on Wing a charm or a Q, both are fine. And if you do W one of those, you are usually winning the trade. The only tricky part is sticking onto her, but that is a struggle that every champion has versus Ari. I like to E aggressively onto an Ari, pre-W a charm or a Q, and then just do a little sidestep to negate some more damage. And that's usually enough to win the trades and the lane. Qiyana has not seen that much, but it's a really decent matchup. You can W her ult, which is massive because that's like half her damage. You can W the Qs, although it feels a bit inconsistent sometimes. One of the biggest things in this matchup is that level 1, Qiyana doesn't do anything. Level 1, sometimes I take half their health bar just by just walking up and auto-attacking and queuing them. Because they can't throw their Q yet, they can't pick up an element yet, they can't really do anything. So level 1, punish hard, W their Qs to get a favorable trade, you can W the ult. If you W the ult, you probably already win. You can opt into a shield bow as like a 3rd item, or a 4th item to not get one shot. Be a pretty decent matchup. I put Pyke in here because you will see Pyke a lot, even if it's not in the mid lane, you'll be roamed on by a Pyke quite often, and sometimes very rarely you'll be laning versus one. A lot of Pykes don't know that Samira W can stop the Pyke dash. The dash that leaves a trail behind him that stuns you, you can W that. So a lot of Pykes will E into you, expect to hit the stun, and then you press W, and that's their gap closer, right? They have no escape, they have no E, and then you just kind of kill them for free. I've had a lot of Pykes like E flash onto me, I just press W, oh that's weird, they're dead. Free kill. Obviously you can also W the Qs. I really like playing into Pykes, it usually feels like a free win. Okay, those were in my opinion the best matchups you can get, where Samira is really good no matter what, and you can hard stomp the lane 1v1. Next up I'm going to be talking about the good matchups. These are still very good, an above average win rate I would say, like you should have fun into these champs most of the time, and do pretty decently into them, 1v1. Twisted Fate is a really good matchup. You don't see this champion mid lane that much anymore. I don't know why, but sometimes he just randomly reappears in the meta. But obviously, Wing a gold card makes this champ pretty much useless. it's really hard for him to win a trade. He gold cards, he red cards, he yellow cards, whatever. E onto him. Make sure you hold the W and don't get baited, because sometimes they will hold their card until you W and then throw it. So make sure you wait for the animation, W the card, and then you kind of just win. I mean, it's hard to lose. They have no W. Really good matchup. If you're on them with E, usually they're just kind of dead. Neferi is a really strong pick, so Samira being good into her kind of says a lot, because a lot of champions really struggle into Neferi. Neferi has a really high win rate, this champ is really easy to play, but as Samira you have decent counterplay. You have to understand that when you are first in Neferi, most her damage comes from spamming Qs. If you get hit by one Q, make sure you don't get hit by the second Q, but heavily focus on Wing the Qs when you can, when you're going for all in, and just not getting hit by them in general. If you W one Q or both Qs, you hard win. It's a free 1v1. And once you are ahead, you can heavily snowball this 1v1. Be careful when you're queuing dogs, because the dogs take, I believe, less damage versus AoE. So an auto attack to kill a dog is better than melee swording a dog, because it counts as AoE, if that makes sense. It's the same with any minion in the game, like Yorick, Ghosts. They're really hard to kill with the AoE sword because it does like no damage. You're better off just auto-attacking them and doing the range Q. Talon is kind of similar in the way of Neferi, where if you just W their W, you can usually kind of just win. Talon's kit relies on hitting like an auto-attack and a Q and a W, or like double auto-attack and a Q, I believe, to get like a bleed proc. You want to avoid getting this bleed proc onto you. When they W it, then go for a trade, but make sure they don't get 3 hits on you until they're low enough, and then you go for an all-in. You can W the ult, you can W their W, which is the little throwing thingies. This is just another one of those matchups where you W to negate damage and then you kind of just win. They can do a lot of damage, so I would opt into like a shield bow this game or like a BT. Eventually as like a third or a fourth item. But more often than not, this matchup shouldn't be too hard. Aurelia is a really fun matchup. For some reason, this just feels really good. You have to be careful when her Q is fully stacked up, because that's when she wants to trade with you. So if she has 4 Qs, be careful, don't let her Q onto you, don't let her hit an E. But apart from that, you can W her E, the one that stuns you, and you can W her ult. Usually that alone should be enough to win the 1v1, because that means she's missing 1 Q reset. Once they do get Bork though, they have a lot of sustain, so you gotta be careful. Taking a trade with her isn't usually that good unless you can actually go for a kill, because she will heal back up. Eventually you will get anti-heal or Dominix into her, but early game it shouldn't be that bad. You can aggressively poke her, you can aggressively auto-attack her, dodge the E's, W the R's, or W the E's, and usually you should just kind of win. Be careful that you also don't throw your entire combo into her W, because she gets a lot of damage reduction when she W's, so that's try and avoid doing all your damage into her W. Yeah. Kinda like playing it to Silas, this matchup doesn't feel that bad. It's heavily evolved around dodging and Wing his E. If you get hit by E, you've lost the trade. If you W the E and they let you trade, you are probably winning. Anti-heal is good in this matchup later on. I wouldn't get it early game though, because then you're just delaying your item spikes. You can W his E, obviously. You want to dodge the Qs, and you can also W his ult. And with that I mean, when he's stealing it, when it's traveling towards you to steal your ult, you can W that steal. Samira ult itself on Silas doesn't really do much, it does like no damage. So don't be afraid to go for a 1v1 like, oh yes, Samira ult. No, trust me, it will do like no damage. Pretty good matchup, I like playing into Silas. Akali is a little bit complicated, but this is a better matchup than most matchups. You have to kind of space her. You have to like bait out the Q and then go for an auto attack. So what I like to do is walk up, pretend I'm about to auto her, do a slight step back so she Qs you and doesn't hit you, and then keep walking to do the Q. Or the auto attack, I mean. Like kind of bait them to Q. Avoid getting hit by the E is a lot of their damage, most their damage. Wing E is massive. If you've W'd the E, you're probably winning the 1v1. A big part of the 1v1 involves Akali's Shroud. You want to try and get your ult off before she Shrouds. Because once she's in Shroud, there's no real training with her. You can't really even hit her. So if you're on her and she's in Shroud, and you don't have enough ult stacks yet, you should probably try and abort and just like get rid of that whole 1v1. If you did get enough ult stacks and you can ult before she goes into the Shroud, great, because now it's going to hit her throughout the whole Shroud. And you probably just win for free. I'm going to put the next 3 in the same category. It's going to be Varus, Akshan, and Smolder. These are all just AD carries that you can kind of just 1v1. The game plan is mostly the same. Look for favorable trades, try and W most of their damage. In Varus, Wing the ult is massive, versus Smolder Wing the ult is massive, versus Akshan Wing the ult is massive. Usually Akshan you can kind of just 1v1, Wing the Q is pretty good in the 1v1, try and avoid getting hit by Q and auto because that usually procs press the attack. Yeah, these matchups are all about W value and looking for the right trades. Pretty decent matchups though, and even if you don't do well in the 1v1, your W would just have a lot of value this game. Like being able to W a Smolder ult every single fight is pretty good. Same with Vera's ult. Echo's another decent matchup. You can W his Q, which means he has one less stack for his passive proc. This is a little bit rough if they have Hellblades. Hellblades make the matchup a bit harder. But 1v1, your game plan is just W his Q. Once they E onto you, you can like E over them to like get more distance. Watch out for the Echo Ws, because usually when they walk into their own W, that means they're about to trade. They will often do this by walking out of vision. If they're walking out of vision, this doesn't mean you're safe. This means they're probably prepping to throw a W, so you don't see it, and then they will randomly run into the W and then trade with you with a shield. So when you don't see him, be careful. He's probably just setting up a W. W his Q when you can. Try and avoid getting hit by 3 attacks, because that's most of his damage. Do keep in mind though, when he's done the 3 attacks, that's usually his damage gone. Very often they will do their triple attack and then just walk away, so you do want to trade back. And obviously avoid standing on the Echo ult. Another thing about the match is that many Echo players, mostly the OTPs, they will be level 6 but not skill up the level R. So it won't look like they have ult. Don't fall for that, they will have ult. Always just assume they have ult level 6. Unless you've seen them ult. Because that's like a little trick that they do so you can't really see the ghost. Next up is Zed, and this is probably one where many people will struggle, but I do think this is a decent matchup. If you're behind, it's rough. But that's versus any champion in Zed when you're behind is rough, because they will just R you into an E, into an auto attack, and you're dead. But the early game is usually not that bad. Avoid getting hit by Qs. If you don't know how ZQ works, I believe it's if you get hit by something, and then it hits you. So let's say the ZQ travels through a minion and then hits you, it does way more damage than if it would just hit you. So use the minions to your advantage. Stand behind them if you can to avoid getting the max Q damage, but also be aware that sometimes they're going to last hit minions with Q, so you don't just want to be hugging them and getting hit for free. This matchup is mostly about getting W value. Wing like a triple Q or a double Q when he's all-inning you can be pretty massive. This is also how you look for an aggressive trade early game. If they put a W forward, you can W forward, you can E forward onto them, W the Qs, and with some luck you just won. If they are onto you, you can also use the E as like an escape, and then just W the Qs when he Qs after you E away from him to just survive. Last one for the good matchups is Fizz. I kind of like playing into Fizz, but this matchup can be a bit complicated and you do have to look out, because one mistake versus Fizz and you're kind of just dead. The biggest part in this 1v1 is watching the E. His E does a lot of damage. If he E's towards you and you can E to literally anything to get away from that E, that's usually worth. Sometimes they will go for a Q into a W trade, into just an E backwards. Usually what I like to do then is try and follow and then just aggressively trade back after. But again, be careful that you don't get hit by the E. The reason why this matchup is decent though is obviously because you can W the Fizz ult. This is just really good. It's really hard for the Fizz to get like a pick late game when you can just W defensively, or level 6 when you just W defensively. One trick people do on Fizz is they Q, and then mid Q animation they will ult towards you. So be on the lookout for that. It's kind of like hide the ult animation, if that makes sense. But yeah, pretty decent matchup overall. So now we're getting into the territory of matchups you don't really want to see. If you see these champs, there should be some warning, there should be some red flags in your mind like, oh, this is not going to be fun. But I'm going to try and help you anyway and try and tell you what to do when you do face these matchups. I'm going to begin with Vel'Koz. This is not a great matchup. Vel'Koz is really strong at the moment. They are very hard to kill if they have barrier, and they just have an insane amount of range. I've won this matchup, I've lost this matchup, it doesn't feel that good to lane into. You can W a lot of their damage. You can even W the little knock-up circle that they do on the ground, which is crazy because that doesn't even feel like a projectile. But Wing that can often make you win a trade or even get you a kill. If you can E on them aggressively, I would try and W a Q or a W, or most importantly the E, because getting hit by the E means you're going to get hit by a Q and a W. So yeah, I would say heavily focus on trying to W his stun, the knock-up. Just be careful. Once you're hit by one Q, most of them just press R on you and there goes 80% of your health bar if you're not just dead. One thing I guess you can keep in mind is that it is really hard for them to rotate their ult, or impossible to rotate their ult if you're behind them. So if they are ulting you and you can E towards them to get behind them, you should do that, because that's the only way to get out of the ult pretty much. And then they're either forced to cancel the ult, or they're sitting there ulting nothing while you're just killing them. Next up is Annie. This is also a really bad matchup. I would say I've won this matchup more than I've lost it. You could go for an early shield bow and hope they don't just one-shot you, but I've killed this champion like 3 times pre-level 6 and still just die 1v1 level 6. Pretty rough lane. You can W the Q range stun. You cannot W the Annie W, and very often when you do kill the Annie, the Tibber just kind of slaps you to death, and that's not great. One random thing about this matchup is that when you W the Annie Q, it doesn't actually proc the stun. So let's say the next spell she's gonna do is gonna stun you, and it's the Q flying towards you, you W that, she is now not back to 0 stacks. She still has max stacks and she can just W for the stun instead, which makes this matchup really, really bad. If that was different, it would be a lot better, because you could actually trade back. I would still look for trades though. W a Q, E in, they don't have Q now. Sometimes they W and you're Eing over them and they miss, and then you kind of just win for free. But yeah, it's important to get defensive items like mid-game to late game, or you're just gonna get repeatedly one-shot. Shield bow is good, BT is good. BT also helps you because you can heal off the Tibbers after you've killed the Annie. But yeah, not a great lane. I'm gonna put Talia in a pretty bad and not in a dodge section, because I actually kind of like playing in Talia. The 1v1 is actually pretty fun, kind of. The biggest issue with Talia is obviously the E. It's the little rock she puts on the ground, and then if you dash into them, you're stunned, which is pretty unplayable for Samira. There's nothing you can do about it. You have to really focus when they're gonna do the flip. That's how they get you. They flip you into the E and then you're stunned and then you're hit by a Q. So this is another one of those matchups where if you can E in, then try and do a sidestep to dodge the little flip. You can W a Q. I'm pretty sure you can W the E. But yeah, not really a great matchup. The biggest problem with this is that no matter at what point in the game, if there's a Talia E on the ground, you literally just cannot E. There's nothing you can do, except for wait or go a different direction or just walk through it, which isn't really that good either. Yeah, the 1v1 is okay and it's fun, but throughout the whole game it's not really that fun. Veigar is a bit of a weird matchup. You can W pretty much everything they do. You can W the Q, you can W the ult, which is pretty massive, but if they get to the late game, you're dead to QR, or dead to like 3 Qs, or sometimes even a WQ. The early game is pretty decent. You can E aggressively, you can W a Q, but they will get strong regardless. They will scale, and then they will maybe one-shot you eventually. If you can get ahead far enough, this matchup is really fun and really good. If they aggressively cage you, you could look to just flash out the cage and E onto them, and that usually means that it's a good fire for you, because that's the only defensive thing they have. So you just have to use their cage against them. If they've used cage and they let you walk up and E them, also usually pretty good trade. You just gotta keep an eye out on the E's. Not much else really to the matchup. Lux will be next, and oh my god, do I hate Lux. This champion is not fun to play against. Probably one of the most boring matchups. It's not even really that bad, because even versus the poke mages, you can kind of just sit back and farm and not do too much. If the Lux sucks, you can do a lot. If they let you E in, it's kind of like the Ahri matchup in a way, where if you E onto them, try and W to predict a Q or an E, and then if you did W the Q or E, you are probably winning that trade. This matchup is just a lot worse than Ahri because she has way more range. Q has more range than the Ahri charm, the E has way more range than the Ahri Q, so you're gonna get poked relentlessly. I would just go Doran's Shield here, second wind, play for your items, maybe get a gank. If they are really bad though, if you're maybe playing in a bit lower elo, you can play it pretty aggressively. But if they're good and they play safe and they sit back, there's not much you can do. If they play stupid and walk up, you can punish them. Next up is Yone. This champion is a bit weird. This used to be a really good matchup where you would just kind of win, but now they kind of just feel unkillable. You don't really win the short trades, you don't really win the extended trades. I've noticed that when I go Stridebreaker into Yone, I feel like I can do a bit more because I have a bit more health to work with. You can W his ranged knockup if you're far away from him. If you're close to him, it won't work. That sometimes helps you to get a favorable trade into like an all-in. Also, something that's a bit weird about this matchup, sometimes you have to block the ult. If you're getting a gank and he's ulting away, you have to position yourself between him and his point of safety and just literally tank the ult, so you can at least still get that kill. Besides that, there isn't that much to the matchup. Try and not trade when he E's you, or like try and not go for an extended trade at least. You obviously still want to be hitting back, but it's really hard to win a trade, especially when they hit W, especially when they're pressing E. I would rather face a Yasuo. LeBlanc is not really a good matchup. I feel like if the LeBlanc is pretty bad, then you can win. If they're good, it's really hard to win a trade. Their Q into W just does so extremely much. You can W the chains, which is something. Like sometimes you W a change, you go for a trade and you can win. Sometimes what you can do is when you know they're about to W you can E towards them to position yourself differently from where their W is going to end up. And then they've missed the W, which is most of their damage. And then you can maybe go for a trade or an all-in. It's a bit hard to shut them down still though when they get like the stealth passive proc, but there isn't really much more you can do, that's just a matchup. W the chains, you can even W a Q, and then if she Ws you, it will do a lot less damage, and then you can maybe go for an all-in, but yeah, not great. I'm gonna put Neeko and Xerath essentially in the same category, because they pretty much have the same game plan. They will poke you down, they'll try to hit a root into a guaranteed like Q poke, so in both matchups you're prioritizing trying to W the root. Sidestep Qs, W the E, both of the E's are the roots, and then maybe you can go for an all-in. The Xerath is a bit easier if you do actually manage to get E onto them. Neeko is a bit more complicated because Neeko actually just kind of ults you when you E in. But usually if a Neeko doesn't hit her E, or you've maybe W the Q, they won't just straight up one-shot you, and neither will Xerath, so getting onto them is usually pretty good. And you can win. It just depends how far they're playing back. Are they letting you E in? Are they letting you W and E? If they do, then you can kind of win. Second wind is pretty good in the both matchups, because they will be pretty much heavily poking you. One small tip about Neeko, Neeko sometimes has an empowered attack, and you cannot W the empowered attack. For some reason that one just doesn't work. So yeah, you gotta keep an eye, don't be like, oh, I'm gonna W the empowered attack here. Nope, doesn't work. Hits you right through it. 3 more mages left that I don't think are very good for Samira. It's Vladimir, Ryze, and the big dragon, Aurelion Sol. The problem is that these champions just heavily outscale you. They all become way too tanky for you to kill. They become way too strong after like 1 or 2 items. And you kind of just lose. Like I've beaten these champs before, and I would say Asol's a bit better than the other two. But they just become way too tanky and they do way too much damage. In Asol you can W pretty much absolutely nothing. Versus Vladimir you can W the E. But he's gonna one-shot you with Q or Ignite anyway, so it doesn't matter that much. Versus Ryze you can W the Qs, but the Qs reset anyway, so again, it doesn't do that much. You can win, you kind of just have to get a feeling for when you can win, and usually this is pre-level 6, and the very early to mid-game, but usually when they hit 1 or 2 item spikes, you just don't really win anymore, unless you're pretty far ahead. Also, versus Vladimir, you really do need an item, like a shield bow mid-game, like 3rd or 4th, because that champ will one-shot you. You can be 20-0, doesn't matter, 1 Vladimir combo, you're dead. I have noticed that into Ryze and Aurelion Sol, the very late game doesn't really feel that bad, because you actually got your damage now, you have as much damage as you possibly get, you got like a defensive item or 2, so you can actually like fight back, do damage. Like just because it's late game doesn't mean hope is lost, it's just the mid game for these gems feels kind of bad. Once you get your Lord Dominic's going, once you get like a shield bow to survive some burst, or a BT to like out heal them a little bit, it becomes a lot more playable. So it's kind of like you have the early game advantage kind of, and then very later on it can kind of feel like you can play again. It sounds weird, but that's my experience from the matchups. Now we come to the champions where you do not want to see these in your game ever if you're playing Samira, in any lane. At all, unless it's on your team. The first 6 champions I'm gonna put all in the same category because they're all awful for Samira. They're all pretty much health stacking tanks. Samira has no percentage health damage, meaning that we don't do anything into people that stack health. We can penetrate their armor, but that's about it. So Cho'Gath with 7000 health is gonna take us very long to kill, but he will kill us in 1 Q and ult. I feel like all these champions, especially mid lane, are really broken. You don't really beat them 1v1. I have before, sometimes you can win, sometimes they're like really bad, but they out damage you at pretty much any point, unless you're really far ahead. They out trade you mostly at any point. You need like 4 items to even feel like you're playing the game. Yeah, if you care about your sanity, if you care about your LP, I would highly recommend dodging these 6 matchups. If you were like me and you play them anyway, here's some tips that you can use into these champs. I kinda like going Black Cleaver into these champions, except for Zac, because you do want to get the anti-heal or Dominic's. But Black Cleaver, it's not even really the armor pen, but it's more the health, while still building damage at the same time that makes it you can kind of play the game. Because the problem is when you just go, let's say you go IE into Lord Dominic's, into a Malphite or a Cho'Gath, right, that's great, you have some damage, but how do you survive a Malphite ult? Or a Cho'Gath Q into an ult? And yeah, you don't. So getting Black Cleaver there feels kind of good just for the survivability. The biggest thing I feel like when you're laning in these two champs is you have to give up on winning the lane. You are not winning the lane no matter what. You are playing to get your items, you're playing to shut down other carries in the game. Pray you have some other good tank killer on the team, because you're for sure not killing this guy. The little counterplay you have is you can W Malphite Qs, you can W Zac Qs, and sometimes that helps a little bit. But in the end you're trading a 30-second cooldown ability for like a 6-second cooldown ability, and you lose anyway. We have no counterplay into Nasus whatsoever, apart from just staying all the way in base, as far away as possible from that guy. Cho'Gath, you can dodge the Qs, but he can W your ult and you just don't win. Zac you don't really beat, Sion you don't really beat. I would say though that Sion feels the best out of these matchups. You can kind of E over the Q sometimes and then he misses the Q. Malphite again you just don't really beat. You can W the Galio Qs, but yeah, that's about all you got going for yourself in these matchups. What I would recommend is take Conqueror, build Black Cleaver, take Gathering Storm, and just hope you can scale and win the team fights. Yes, so now you're thinking, yeah, surely it can't get worse, right? Sure, yeah, it can get worse, trust me. Because there's Victor! Yay! This champion counters you in every single way, outpokes you, outrange you. Once you E-onto him, they put a W down and you can't play the game anymore. His ult cancels your ult. Yep, his ult interrupts channels, and Samira ult is a channel, so you literally cannot ult. So how do you win? And the answer is you don't, unless they don't know that his ult cancels your ult. Then you can win. So you have to you need them to be stupid. Yeah. You can W the Q, it's the only thing you can W, but they will still get the empowered attack and the shield from it, so it doesn't really do that much. Pretty unplayable. Get the Dorn shield, get second wind, or just take Gathering Storm and hope you can skill. Next up is Lissandra. This is actually not as bad as any of the other ones on this list, but it's still a pretty annoying matchup. You just don't really win. You don't really kill them. You can go for an aggressive trade, you can W their Q. You will get hit by their W no matter what you do, but you can win a trade like that. One thing you do have going for yourself, but you need a jungler for this, is when you do get a good gank, you can E onto them aggressively, W their E, which is their escape, and then it will make their E disappear, meaning that they can't teleport, and then you can kind of kill them for free. That's about the only thing you can do. Sometimes you win the 1v1s by Wing the Qs and then just winning, but not a great lane. You get outshoved, you get outroamed, you get outpoked. When you in, you get W'd. Yeah. Then there's Hui. This champion is peak Riot Gaming design. 30 abilities, hit you from Africa. You W the ult, you get Q'd for half your health bar. You W the Q, you get ult for half your health bar. You cannot really win this. If they have half a brain, you just don't win. There's nothing you can really do. You can W the ult mostly in team fights, which is what I would focus on. But this is probably... I perm-ban this matchup. This is literally unplayable. You actually cannot play the game. Even if you don't care about your OP, I guarantee you, you will not have fun in this 1v1. Just, yeah, click the X button and go to the next game. Vex, you would kind of think this is a really good matchup, which it's not. But some people for some reason think like, oh, you can W the ult, you can W the Q, you can W the E. Sounds good to me. But that's not really the problem in this matchup. The problem in this matchup is that she has a fear, and she can proc that fear with an aura around her that will damage you and shield herself. Meaning that anytime you E in, and she has fear, all she needs to do is press W, and you cannot do anything. If they aggressively throw their fear with like a Q or an E, or they just W for fun, that's your time to go in. But yeah, that champion counters dashes, so it doesn't really feel that good anyway. I would say that I've noticed if you can W the Q and the E, or just the fear Q, that can be more worth than Wing the ult if you're going for an all-in, because you just need to get rid of the fear. The fear makes it unplayable. Getting hit by the ult doesn't really matter that much, mostly. But if she misses fear and you can W the ult, okay, well GG, you won, unless she fears you again. I mean, she probably would. Syndra would be my go-to ban if Hui wasn't turbo broken. Another unplayable matchup. The reason why this is so unplayable is because your W on the E, like sometimes you can W Syndra E and it's really inconsistent. If you get onto her and you W the E, great. Now you're on her, she can push you back, GG. But if you E onto her and you try and W the E and it doesn't work, okay, now you're stunned, you've used W on nothing, you can no longer gap close because you used E, and you can't W her ult because you just used it on nothing. So you lose. So this is literally coin flipping 1v1. You can sit there and not do anything and never go for a W, but then you're not winning anyway. So it's just super inconsistent. One thing you can do is when they E you and they are a bit slow to do their combo, they will often throw the W on the E. E to them or anyone else and then they miss the W. It might save you a bit of health, but overall pretty unplayable lane. If W would work 100% of the time, this matchup would be really, really good, but it doesn't. And the not knowing if it will work or not makes it really unplayable, because you literally don't know how to play. It can literally mean the difference of you winning or losing the matchup if W works or not. So yeah, it's just unfun. Fix the game, Riot. Last on the list is Zoe, and my god, this champion, I don't even know who came up with this design, but wowza. I am not joking, I played against this champ last week and I faced this champ over 100 times. I lost half my health bar to a 0-0 Zoe who missed Q, eat into my W, and just ignited auto-attack me with Sparkle's passive. Half my health bar. Hello? You literally just don't win. You can't really afford to W a Q because you need to W the E. If you do mess up once and you do get hit by E when you're playing aggressively, you are 100% dead. Sometimes they mess up, sometimes they miss E, or you W it and you can win and you can kill them, but it's such a like high risk, low reward matchup because you can be 3-0 or 4-0 and you've stomped them early game. Yeah, they have lost chapter. Unlucky, you get hit by 1E out of vision over a wall. Yeah, you're dead. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the video or if you thought it was helpful. I put a lot of effort into this one, kind of. I was going to do like every matchup in the game, and then I realized it would be like a 2 to 3 hour video. So I did the most important ones, like the best ones and the worst ones, just so you kind of know what to avoid and what the fun matchups can be. If you do want me to do a more extensive one where I cover more matchups or a specific matchup, let me know and I'll gladly do them. I just didn't want to do one like randomly if there's no real interest. But if there is, let me know. Thank you for watching and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye!